The Sims, that life simulation game you've either heard of growing up or are completely addicted to. I'm convinced there's no in between. The latest installment of the game has undoubtedly received the most amount of backlash from its most dedicated players. So today I'm going to analyze where this downward spiral all began. Is this widespread contempt for The Sims 4 simply a community bandwagon, or is there truly something fundamentally wrong with this game?
Let's have a talk about The Sims 4.
It is the same thing over and over.
And what they've been doing for the past 6 years, which I consider scamming.
I would not play The Sims 4 without mods, period.
Mod creators should not make your game. You should be making your game.
Maybe we care too much and they don't care as much or at all.
The Sims 4 is boring as hell. Like, let's just get into it. The Sims 4 is boring as hell.
Welcome back, you guys. This is part 2 to my 2-part series examining what really happened to The Sims 4. So if you haven't already seen part 1, go ahead and catch up with that. The link will be in the description down below, and I'll also attach it in a card up above. This is the meat, the juice, the lettuce for my vegans and vegetarians out there. But to have greater context, it's best to understand The Sims 1 through 3 before we talk about The Sims 4. So be sure to check out that video first and then come back to this one. But assuming that you've already watched that video, let's go ahead and talk about The Sims 4. The Sims 4 was released on September 2nd, 2014 in the United States. But we're gonna back up to summer 2013, roughly a year before The Sims 4 came out. At this point, the Sims franchise already had a fairly large following on Twitter, on Tumblr, a variety of different blogs and forums, and I would even say this time was sort of like the rise of Sims YouTube channels. Creators like Life Simmer, The Sims Supply, Urban Sims, Andrew Arcade, iPod Zeke, even the Queen, may she rest in peace, were all super prominent Sims YouTube channels during that time. These are just some of the ways we started to see an emerging online Sims community developing. And for the most part, the community was really excited to see what was to come in the next generation of the game.
I just got off of a conference call with EA, and they just announced to me that they are creating The Sims 4. It is official. The Sims 4 will hit stores in 2014.
The world that they've shown us, Willow Creek, is the most beautiful world I have ever seen in The Sims.
The Sims 4 Create a Sim demo. I'm telling you, this is so detailed. It's insane.
Hopefully you guys are excited as I am, because we've been waiting for The Sims 4.
The very first time we got to see inside The Sims 4 was at the Gamescom convention, which was held in Germany in August 2013. Luckily, there's a couple of videos on The Sims official YouTube channel going through this event, so let's go through it together, shall we?
This is a bold step forward for our Sims as they come to life like never before in The Sims 4. Our Sims have evolved into intelligent, emotionally aware beings whose every action is informed and affected by their emotional states.
Well, that didn't age well.
New creative tools, emotions, and dynamic gameplay give our players the ability to affect the mind, body, and heart of these new Sims, bringing their stories to life in a way that's more meaningful and more personal than ever before. In The Sims 4, we've reinvented our creative tools to be intuitive, powerful, and flexible. It's easier and faster for me to create exactly the home that I want.
Now, this is actually true. Now, I don't build, but I've watched other people build, and for the most part, from what I've seen, it seems to me that build mode has lived up to the way it was presented.
With our new Create a Sim, I can reach directly into the game and sculpt my Sims by hand.
Maxis, EA, whomever, they truly snapped with Create a Sim. I think it's not a surprise that Create a Sim is by far one of the best features about The Sims 4. And by the time I'm filming this, they even fixed the skin tone. So Cass is just really on and popping now.
And it's more than just looks. I can even set their walk styles to match their personalities.
I'm gonna be honest, I completely forgot this feature even existed in the game. I don't think anybody uses this feature anymore.
Let me show you how playing with these new Sims and their emotions which for the first time you control.
We'll revisit this later, allowing the player to control the emotions.
And their emotions will fundamentally change the experience that you have in The Sims 4.
Well, that didn't age well either. So this is what The Sims 4 was designed to be. This is how the game was marketed to us. The motto of The Sims 4, at least according to this event, was new emotions, new smarts, new Sims. Which on paper sounds fantastic. Our Sims were now going to be emotionally intelligent and aware. Cast is going to be so tactile and amazing. So was build mode. Building was going to be so much faster. For the most part, people in the community had very high expectations and were anxiously awaiting the arrival of The Sims 4. So now onto the part most of y'all are probably curious about. What happened? We were giving all of these super high expectations, but The Sims 4 has just seemingly got increasingly more flack over the years. Has The Sims 4 deviated from Will Wright's original path? Or is the foundation, the structure, the framework of The Sims 4 so significantly different that it is a fundamentally different game than what we've seen prior? This is a lot deeper than just not having cars, a color wheel, or an open world. So to start this deep dive, let's take a look at how life simulation was done in The Sims 4 upon its release. And then we'll return to Will Wright's success formula and analyze how well The Sims 4 followed his initial example. So life simulation kind of works backwards in The Sims 4, so I'm actually going to start by telling you guys about the emotion system and then show you how this system affects a lot of the other personality and gameplay features. Emotions were marketed as the core feature that was supposed to be the backbone of The Sims 4.
The big selling point for The Sims 4 are the Sims having emotions.
My favorite part is the emotion-based storytelling, that how your feeling affects how your day's gonna go and how your life is.
This is what was supposed to make this game. But let me be clear, emotions is not an entirely new concept to the Sims franchise. In previous generations of The Sims, we had like mood meters and other ways your Sims interacted that implied certain emotions, particularly memories and personality points in The Sims 2, as well as moodlets and traits in The Sims 3. But now in The Sims 4, we have your Sim's current emotional state explicitly stated in the bottom left corner. In The Sims 4, your Sim's emotions are impacted by their needs, their traits, their surroundings, or recent interactions or events. For example, if your Sim really needs to pee, they'll feel uncomfortable. When it comes to their surroundings, if you place an object in your home that produces a happy buff or an inspired buff, your Sim will feel that emotion no matter what. Recent interactions will also impact your Sim's emotions as well. So if you take a steamy shower, they'll feel flirty. Or if they recently got into a fight, they may feel confident or dazed afterwards, depending on if they won or lost. Traits in The Sims 4 were also heavily rooted in this emotions idea. If you read the description on any given trait, you'll see an emotional state attached to it in one way or another. Goofballs tend to be playful, geeks become happy when reading sci-fi books or playing video games, materialistic Sims become sad when they haven't purchased a new item in a while. And I'll talk more about traits in a minute, but what you need to know for now is that they're heavily rooted in this emotions system. So that's the gist of emotions. Now we're gonna hop into create a Sim. So the only features in Cast that really give your Sim's personality are traits and aspirations. We no longer have like favorites or zodiac signs, and now you can only select 3 traits for your Sims as opposed to 5. There are a total of 37 base game traits you can select from in Create a Sim. They're divided amongst 4 categories: emotional, social, hobby, and lifestyle traits. Over the course of DLC pack releases, 17 more traits have been added. That gives us a total of 54 selectable traits in Create a Sim when you have every current expansion, game pack, and stuff pack installed. Just so you know, in The Sims 4, new traits come with all of the DLC packs, not just expansions. The Sims 4 will also automatically give your Sim a bonus trait based on the aspiration you've selected for them. For example, with the business savvy bonus trait, your Sim will earn more money in their career. Sims with the gregarious bonus trait will build friendly relationships faster, and quick learners will learn all their skills a bit faster than other Sims. So they're definitely more skill-based, but they technically are an additional trait your Sims get. So although you can't choose the bonus trait for them, we technically do have a total of 4 traits in The Sims 4. So adding all of these selectable traits and the bonus traits together, there are a total of 48 Create a Sim traits in The Sims 4 base game. But with all the current DLC packs installed, there are a total of 72 traits. Again, with the bonus traits and selectable traits all combined together. By the time I'm filming this video, we are about 6 years and 3 months into The Sims 4. So these are just the current statistics for the DLC packs we currently have. So aspirations are another aspect that's supposed to give your Sims personality in The Sims 4. Lifetime wishes are now called aspirations again. Stay with me. They're a lot like The Sims 3, where they're more so focused on maxing out a certain skill or reaching certain tangible goals. The Sims 4 gives you more of like a checklist of a skill you need to max, or a career you need to max, or interactions you need to do. But like we saw with the traits, the quantity of aspirations we have has reduced as well. 24 aspirations come with The Sims 4 base game, and currently 22 have been added over the course of DLC packs. That gives us a total of 46 aspirations in The Sims 4 with all of the current content installed. Like the traits, the aspirations are divided amongst several different categories. So we have things like fortune, creativity, and popularity, for example. So it's like the same aspiration themes like we've seen in previous Sims games. When The Sims 4 first came out, emotions, traits, and aspiration would all affect your Sims' wants or desires, which are now called whims. Instead of having 4 wants or wishes like we did in The Sims 2 and 3, we now have 3 whims. One whim is always determined by your Sim's current emotional state, and so that will change as your Sim's emotion changes. And the other 2 are determined by your Sim's traits, aspirations, or current circumstance. For example, being in the presence of a loved one, a whim about that Sim might come up. The whim system is very narrowly focused on the present moment as opposed to like larger goals or general wishes. And so they really took in this idea of doing something on a whim, which I personally do think is very fitting given the fact that The Sims 4 was really based and rooted in this emotional system. However, due to a lot of corruption with this whim system, whims by default are disabled with The Sims 4. This came in the 73rd patch, the patch that came with the season's expansion pack. You can go into settings and re-enable them if you want, but whenever you do start a new game, they are automatically disabled by default. The main bug or flaw with this whim system is that when you installed more DLC packs, one whim was usually clogged up by like a want or desire to do something that came with one of your expansion packs. I think the height of this can be seen with the season expansion pack, where like all of your Sims would get the desire to buy a B-box despite their personality or their traits. It was just like, since you had that expansion installed, the game wants you to play with the features, so then the whims sort of started becoming a part of the tutorial to walk you through that new pack that you just installed. So over time, as EA, created more content, your Sims had less whims based on their actual lives and personalities and more just based on the DLC features. That being said, whims ultimately ended up taking more away from your Sims 4 life simulation experience, given the fact that EA did make that decision to disable them by default. And they have not created any new whims since the season's expansion pack. There are mods where people in the community have sort of reinvented the whim system, got rid of like the annoying like expansion pack features that would just show up with all your Sims, and the modders have reinvented the system to be more personalized to your actual Sims, and they've added new whims with each expansion pack. So if that is something you're interested in, there are resources and stuff like that available online for download, but this was a feature upon release, so I wanted to talk about them. Another life simulation aspect that makes The Sims 4 unique is the ability to gain more traits as you actually play the game. With The Sims 4, there's a reward store, and you can redeem satisfaction points for additional perks or traits to give to your Sims. You can earn satisfaction points by completing whims if you have them enabled, or by completing aspirations. Reward traits like Morning Sim and Observant or Gym Rat actually impact the way your Sims navigate through the world by adding small behaviors to your Sims in-game, and also like identifying different strengths that they may possess. For example, I thought the Always Welcome trait was kind of interesting. On the Sims Wiki, it says that these Sims will act more at home when at others' residences, and the host won't mind at all. So although this is a pretty like basic sort of layout, I do think that this sort of personality trait actually impacts the way your Sims navigate through the world and also the way that they're perceived in the world. I feel like this could be an extension of maybe like a friendly type trait. While there are clearly more cheaty traits in the reward store, like steel bladder that makes your Sims never have to pee again, or frugal that automatically reduces your bills, there are some actual personality features you can give your Sim through the store. So that's why I decided to add it to like the life simulation process in The Sims 4. A reward store did exist in both The Sims 2 and 3, but again, those were more so focused on like the more cheaty aspects of the game. The last big way you can give your Sims personality in The Sims 4 is with different DLC packs. I'm not gonna get too detailed because this can become pretty complex, but with the Parenthood pack, for example, they introduce something called character value traits, where your child Sim that you raise can gain different traits like responsible, for example, that would be a result of the way that they were raised, and they would take that trait with them into young adulthood. I think things like this, like being responsible or being a mediator or argumentative, these character value traits stick with your Sim and impact the way they sort of interact with the world. So that's just one example of how you can get new personality features through different DLC packs. I'm gonna be honest, I've never personally played a Sims 4 save long enough to really see this whole trait system in action, but from what I've read and from the videos I've watched, I do really enjoy this idea of being able to add new traits to your Sim as you play the game more. I think that's a kind of a cool way to sort of show evolution and like human development. Some other key like life simulation features of The Sims 4 is things like multitasking. Your Sims can now, like, if they're at a bar, they can have their drink in their hand, they can dance, and they can talk to their friends all at the same time. The Sims 4 life simulation also has a heavy focus on socializing and like going with your Sims to things. With the nature of The Sims 4, it is like a closed world environment. Therefore, The Sims 4 has significantly reduced the number of rabbit hole lots. But also consequently, that means there are less lots in the base game that you can visit. To get those more types of lots, you have to install more packs. Like for example, like restaurants in The Sims 3 were in the base game. They were rabbit hole lots though, so you only had like a few options of what you could do at the restaurant. But there were like sets on The Sims 3 store that actually created interactive restaurants. So if you did want that feature, you could pay for that with The Sims 3 store. But in The Sims 4, there aren't restaurants in the game by default, not even rabbit hole lots. But if you do want that feature, you have to purchase like the Dine Out pack. But I give that example just to show how socialization is a key aspect of The Sims 4. So that was life simulation in The Sims 4. And from everything I explained, in theory, it sounds like all of these different features together would equate to rich, deep, and meaningful gameplay. So now we're going to take a look at the core life simulation difference between The Sims 4 and its predecessors. I've essentially compounded the most prominent community criticism into 3 main points. Number 1, gameplay in The Sims 4 doesn't mean anything unless you make it mean something. Emotions, the foundation of The Sims 4, are meaningless within the game itself. This is an idea that's reoccurred multiple times in my research. The first reason emotions are meaningless is because they're too malleable, and the second reason is because there's no sense of interconnectedness in the game. So for starters, the malleability of emotions was not something even noticed very far down the line, but very early on in the game's release. Check out this clip from LGR's Sims 4 review that was uploaded quite literally 2 days after The Sims 4 was released.
Of course, it can be manipulated pretty easily simply by ingesting unlocked potions or surrounding yourself with specific things. Many decor and clutter objects can emit an emotional aura. If you place a bunch of them around each other, these can conflict though, and sometimes their emotions change so rapidly from one extreme back to the other that your Sim could probably be diagnosed with a variety of psychoses.
But that's not all. If you check out this 2016 video created by him, now we have like a couple expansion packs, a few game packs, and a lot of stuff packs. You can see here that the malleability of emotions continue to be a problem.
And they're very easily manipulated, too easily manipulated. You just stick an object in your house and all of a sudden you have this emotion or that emotion.
You can see that the malleability of emotions continues to be a problem today, given that this video was just uploaded several months ago.
I can have a Sim who, mother just died this morning and she's feeling sad because, her parent or her mom passed. But then let her walk into a well-decorated room. Let her get a promotion. She's happy. She's fine. She doesn't matter. Her mom died this morning. Oh, girl, I'm happy. the emotions are all over the place.
If you do remember from Will Wright's initial example, seeing how people were affected by their surroundings and their environment was one of his original intentions with the game. So I can kind of see this with the way emotions work, kind of having build mode and live mode kind of intersect in that way. So I can see that intention. But it just really seems that like just with the system of emotions, it still seems like too malleable and too powerful of a system on its own. Different emotions in The Sims 4 really don't change anything in your world aside from giving you like a few new animations to look at.
Like they kind of aimed really high to have my Sims have these intense emotions and realistic emotions, and then it ends up just being like, oh, you are flirty. Oh, now you are happy, and nothing really changes.
You know, you get an angry poop or something every so often, but it's the same thing as any other time you go to the toilet. It's just to do it angrily, I guess. It doesn't really affect much of anything.
It's a poorly implemented system that makes all your Sims feel exactly the same.
Going off of that, the second reason emotions and gameplay are meaningless in The Sims 4 is because there's no sense of interconnectedness beyond your own imagination or interference to make that a reality. So let's take a look at Townie Sims, for example. This is the Caliente family. They've been in the Sims franchise since The Sims 2, but when you load up their household in The Sims 4, the biography written for them doesn't even correspond to their actual status in the game. The family bio implies that there's a love triangle, or I guess square, between Nina, Dina, Katrina, and Dawn. But when you open up their relationship panel, you find that they're all really just friends. They don't really have the relationships in the game that the game says that they do. Whereas in The Sims 2 and 3, those romances would have already been set up for you. The same concept applies to really any Townie household you open up in The Sims 4. So you can kind of see here how they really structured The Sims 4 to kind of just allow the player to do whatever it is that they want.
If you have a good imagination, The Sims is fun to you. If you don't, good luck, Charlie. Because half of your gameplay, half of your storytelling is not being shown to you on your screen. It's in your head.
Family bios are more so gameplay suggestions than real facts or stories that you can actually play out. And in the last video, I went on a whole spiel talking about how why storytelling is kind of the whole point to The Sims. And that's just talking about the Townie Sims. They don't know anything about each other or are connected in any sort of meaningful way. But neither are your own Sims. After your Sims like 4-hour moodlet expires, your Sims don't remember anything in The Sims 4 unless you decide to remember it for them. I will say though, a semi-recent patch has attempted to fix this. They added sentiments into the game that was meant to make emotions more meaningful and also kind of make your Sims remember more things. For like example, if your Sim got cheated on with the sentiment system, your Sim would actually remember that they got cheated on and they wouldn't just be happy because there's a happy photo around when they're around that person. They'll remember, oh, he cheated on me, so now I'm angry. Their emotional state will reflect past things that have happened to them with other Sims. And from the research I've done, the community has been pretty receptive to this. I think this is definitely a step in the right direction.
Overall, I am impressed. I actually expected the sentiments to be a lot more shallow than they are. However, there are a few problems with this, and that's mostly due to the emotions themselves. They're still unbalanced.
So I feel like this is adding in that realism that has been missing because emotions really aren't that strong.
However, being that emotional intelligence was one of the key features in the initial marketing for The Sims 4, that implies that they spent a lot of time working on it and developing it.
Emotions influence the gameplay, not just in this moment, but down the line.
It just doesn't seem like they're prioritizing the things that they said were a priority. Some of the ways we've seen emotions and Sim behaviors be meaningful in the past is through the memories, the lore, the story progression, the moodlets, as well as Sim and household bios. The decreased significance of memories in the Sims franchise in general is what makes the idea of having emotions kind of counterproductive, because nothing is really driving your Sims' emotions apart from their malleable environment, emotion-oriented traits, and how you, the player, decide to manipulate them. So gameplay and emotions are essentially meaningless in The Sims 4. Why is this a problem? Well, this kind of defeats the whole purpose of The Sims being a life simulator. Without having your Sims' experiences and decisions be impacted by one another, The Sims 4 starts to feel a lot more like playing God than simulating life. You can really make whatever you want to happen whenever you want it to happen, regardless of your Sim's traits and what's happened to them prior. And although this sort of ultimate control sounds good in theory, it's not really how a life simulator should work. And I think where you stand on this and your tolerance for this approach really significantly affects the way you feel about The Sims 4 and whether or not you enjoy playing. So the second major life simulation difference between The Sims 4 and its predecessors is the fact that Sims don't have personality beyond your own imagination. Emotions and personalities have essentially become one in the same. So Will Wright prioritized the Sims' behaviors in both The Sims 1 and 2. In Sims 3 heavily prioritized the trait system. We saw that last time. But thinking that emotions would affect your Sims' behaviors, The Sims 4 prioritized the emotion system as opposed to developing Sim personality and behaviors by themselves, separate from the emotion system. Like I mentioned earlier, traits in The Sims 4 have an emotional state attached to them no matter what. And another primary difference between these traits in The Sims 4 compared to its predecessors is the extreme lack of depth in detail. And I think this is especially prominent because we've seen so much more detail in prior Sims games. Remember all the things the bookworm trait would allow your Sim to do in The Sims 3? We talked about that in the last video. So now let's take a look at the bookworm trait in The Sims 4. So the bookworm trait is a hobby trait, and the attributes, according to the Sims Wiki, says that bookworm Sims can analyze a book, which will give them an inspired moodlet for 4 hours, and bookworm Sims can discuss their favorite authors and latest book with other Sims. So that's literally it. And remember, you can only choose 3 traits for your Sims, so it kind of almost feels expected that these traits at the very least would be a lot more detailed like we've seen in the past. The in-game gameplay difference between the impact of traits in The Sims 3 and The Sims 4 is pretty stark. Instead of actually creating like personality traits that would affect your Sim's emotions like we've seen in the past, The Sims 4 essentially created a game where emotions were supposed to be your Sim's personality. So Sims don't have personality in The Sims 4 unless you install mods or imagine it. Why is this a problem? Well, when it comes down to it, the whole point of The Sims originally was to play your Sims' distinct behaviors and see how they relate to one another. And one huge way we used to be able to establish our Sims' personality in prior games is through the trait system and different features we could give our Sim and create a Sim. And so traits in The Sims 4 more so functioning as emotion triggering, skill building, or relationship building perks you can add onto your Sims is a huge difference because we're not able to really define their personality in Create a Sim like we've been able to in the past.
They're sort of lacking like that core definition of their personality from the actual game. You can make a story for them. I could pretend that and I could tell that story in my own head, but like as far as the game is concerned, the game itself doesn't know that about my Sim.
But this red flag about whether or not emotions were kind of game-changing or a real selling point of The Sims 4 was not just something noticed after the game had been out for a while, but I even found this video that came out in summer of 2013. This was right after we had seen that Gamescom footage, and this person had questioned whether or not emotions were a real selling point or a real necessary feature we needed in our Sims games.
Now, I will say, and I'd like to know what you think about this in the comments, that I don't find this to be a huge selling point. I can tell you that my Sims 2 Sims have plenty of emotions and plenty of story to tell, so this selling point isn't really pushing me over the edge as far as what I'd wanted to, the reason why I'd want to buy The Sims 4.
So, you saw it here first. Another primary life simulation difference between The Sims 4 and its predecessors is having to pay for more personality and gameplay features. I've kind of already touched on this, but I wanted to also make it its own point. And I'm talking like significantly more money. I think whether you love The Sims 4 or not so much, I think we can all agree that this game is way too expensive. Given the fact that they tried to charge us $60 for the standard edition of this game upon release is very telling. But if you wanted like a few new hats and like random costumes, you could pay $70 US for the deluxe edition, $80 US for the premium edition, and over $100 for the collector's edition. Hey Siri, define robbery. And I don't care how you feel about The Sims 4, But nothing in that 2014 base game was worth $100, yet half $100. But I mentioned that to say that even early on, we have the most expensive base game for arguably the most lacking one of the series. I think most people are familiar that things like toddlers and pools and family trees all didn't exist upon launch. We also know that the Sims 4 base game has, significantly smaller worlds than we've seen in the past. So yes, like scammery, robbery, kind of a part of EA's brand. But the Sims 4 base game was not just lacking in content, but also lacking in sim personality. And because the Sims 4 spent so much time focusing on these emotions, there weren't any other base game features to really rely on to give our Sims personality when that happened. So this is where the DLC packs come in, attempting to kind of fix all the things that weren't quite up to par in the base game and to give us features that were just altogether missing in the base game. So, Exhibit A. We have the Get Together expansion, the second expansion to The Sims 4. It introduced clubs. Now, a lot of people are pretty fond of this club system now. If you're not familiar with it, essentially clubs give us a more concrete way to keep friends and connect with our Sims. They forgot to do that in the base game, and connecting with your Sims through personality isn't really like a thing in The Sims 4, as we've already discussed. So clubs gave us a more concrete way to keep and maintain relationships in the game. We have Parenthood that introduced character value traits, and we've already discussed that before, but these are traits that stick with your Sims from childhood into adulthood. And we have Snowy Escape introducing lifestyles, which are essentially like actual personality traits, but you can only really attain them through playing the game, unless you want to cheat. But that's another like personality trait feature that it came with an expansion pack. I will say though that some gameplay features have been patched into The Sims 4 for free, like the sentiments I mentioned, but the majority of these gameplay and personality features have been added with DLC packs. And then when you do decide to invest in these packs for the features that you want, oftentimes people have been quick to find that the packs aren't as expansive as it could be or should be, especially for the price that you paid.
Some of them are filled with content, while others are just, it's like, what is this? What are you handing me, EA? I'm not getting anything.
You can't keep charging this and not giving us anything in return.
And we've this person on Twitter who says, do I think The Sims 4 is worth the money? No, absolutely not. Do not buy this game when it's not on sale. If you've looked into this before, you've probably seen like all the comments or tweets or posts about how much more money in Sims 4 DLC you have to pay to get a Sims 3 expansion pack equivalent. For example, like bowling in The Sims 4 is its own $10 pack, whereas bowling in The Sims 2 came with nightlife, and bowling in The Sims 3 came with university life. In The Sims 4, all of their DLC packs are super specialized, so you only install the content that you really want, which in theory does sound good. The trade-off is that you are spending a lot more money for The Sims 4 for that more selective approach. But don't get me wrong, Sims content has always been expensive. I talked about in the last video how overpriced the Sims 3 store still is, and Sims 3 expansion packs were also $40 upon release. So like that pricing hasn't changed, but what has changed is the content and the way The Sims 4 is structured, making you kind of have to purchase more content if you want to have the most enjoyable experience in the game and really experience all that it has to offer. The Sims 4 base game is really the template, and the expansions, game packs, and stuff packs is where all the gameplay features are. I've seen so many tweets and comments and posts from people who enjoy The Sims 4 and play it, who admit that the game is a lot more enjoyable when you do own more packs. Whereas The Sims 3, yes, that is partially true, like to get the best experience at The Sims 3, it is nice to have more expansion packs, but at the end of the day, they were still optional. The Sims 2 and 3 were still enjoyable on their own without the expansions and other packs. The packs just expanded on what you could do.
A lot of it has to do with expansions being missing. But you also have to think about the fact that Sims 2 base game was fine, Sims 3 base game was fine. I should be able to play the Sims 4 base game without getting bored.
I remember just feeling like it was very empty. there wasn't enough to call this an actual game. It's more of just like a facilitator for the rest of the expansion packs, which, in my opinion, isn't what the base game is supposed to be.
The reason EA can sell the Sims 4 base game for so cheap, $5 I've seen, especially around the holiday season. I've even seen it for free once. The reason they can do this is because I feel like they do know that the Sims 4 base game is pretty lacking on its own, and what makes the game really come alive is the packs that you can download or purchase. Of course, Electronic Arts, the company who is responsible for publishing The Sims, is in the interest of making money. At the end of the day, they're a business, so I expect businesses to do what they want to do to remain in business and make the most money that they can. But that does not make this any less frustrating that we have to spend significantly more money with The Sims 4 for more content, especially when we didn't have to do that with The Sims 3 when we thought that was too expensive. And my guess is The Sims 4 decided to do this to optimize performance. As we saw before, Sims 3 performance was a big drawback for a lot of players, and with this approach you also get like the utmost options about what you want in your game and what you don't want. But it just kind of feels like you're paying for performance and for optimization and just for the ability to choose. So those are the major life simulation differences in The Sims 3 versus its predecessors. The fact that gameplay and emotions doesn't really mean anything within the world itself, personalities and emotions kind of being grouped into the same bucket and also not really being that meaningful within the actual game itself. And then finally, having to pay for DLC and other content or going out of your way to install mods to be able to attain more realistic and personal life simulation and personality in the game. So now let's revisit Will Wright's success formula and compare it to how life simulation was actually done in The Sims 4. Keeping in mind that The Sims 4 is a life simulator, so we're coming in with the expectation that life simulation is the strongest aspect of this game. Taking an approachable subject, everyday life. With the exception of a few experimental packs, I would say that for the most part this still holds up today. Well-tested interface. Questionable. The Sims 4 is well tested in the sense of playability and approachability. The Sims 4 can run on a variety of different computers, therefore making it accessible to more people. That's why we have such small worlds and also a bazillion loading screens in this game. That's kind of the trade-off. But as far as the gameplay is concerned, if the gameplay has been tested for an extended period of time prior to release, I have my doubts. I feel like basic things like whims becoming an oversight, emotions kind of being too malleable and overpowering, and traits not being very meaningful. I feel like, again, if The Sims 4 was tested for longer periods of time with different types of players, I feel like a lot of these basic things could have been done a lot better and would work most effectively. Open-ended narrative and rich gameplay. I'm combining both of these together. These are the two main aspects where The Sims 4 has gone astray from Will Wright's initial example. But unless you install somebody else's save or install mods, in The Sims 4, lore and storytelling and narrative doesn't really exist beyond your own imagination or interference. The Sims 4 took an approach where open-ended narrative is honestly so open-ended, and the gameplay, which is supposed to accompany our stories, is very shallow. There's no real mystery about who your Sims are, who their neighbors are, or what will happen in their lives. You know the beginning and end to everyone's stories because you're the one like making it up as you go along. An unmodded Sims 4 game does not really notice a difference between any Sims. Therefore, this is the most hands-off Sims game we've ever had in the series. So why is this game structured in the way that it is? It seems to me that this approach was intentional. This was ultimately done to explore and also support how this playstyle would work in the Sims franchise. James Turner did an interview with Lindsay Pearson in 2019. She is the general manager of The Sims, and she explains how this is something they debated a lot while developing The Sims 4, and she found that this approach actually supports her playstyle more.
We've done a lot of different versions of this throughout generations of The Sims, right? So in Sims 2, because you didn't have the whole world continuing at the same time, we had these preset stories that you could play when you started a family, right? You could play a certain thing with the Goths, you could play a certain thing with the Pleasants. And they were, I thought, really cool as like a jumping off point, but then everybody else really didn't advance with you. But in Sims 3, we got to the point that as soon as you started a game anywhere, everything kind of went off the rails because anyone could go anywhere they wanted, which for me and my personal play style was a little bit more frustrating because I was like, no, I wanted to make you best friends, and now you're like, I don't even know what happened to you. And so Sims 4 is a different take in that regard. Like you said, it is not creating the same amount of differentiation in Sims 3.
And honestly, before doing this research, I really didn't think about that perspective. So if you love like more control or customization in that way over your Sims stories, I can see why The Sims 4 may be a preferred game for you. When The Sims 4 was initially released, in addition to weirder Sims and weirder stories, or smarter Sims, all the other slogans, you create, you control, you rule was another catchy slogan they used to market this game initially. In fact, that saying is on the back of my Sims 4 box. So this was an intention from the very beginning. The Sims 4 is more so a facilitator for you, the player, to do most of the heavy lifting and really make the game what you want it to be.
They are yours to create and control. Their stories are yours to tell.
Some people really like this approach and other people not so much. And I think where you stand on this and your tolerance for this approach really significantly affects the way you feel about The Sims 4 and whether or not you enjoy playing. But the lack of in-game storytelling and sort of connection within the game itself is a major difference between The Sims 4 and its predecessors, which is why a lot of people critique it.
I think they're like, in The Sims 4, trying to move away from that like actual definition in the game and giving us more room for storytelling. They want to like impact our games less and let us impact them more, but I honestly prefer a little bit more interaction in my Sims lives. I want the game to tell me what's going on to an extent, but like a pretty far extent.
But speaking on the player-focused approach of The Sims 4, let's talk about the last 2 points of Will Wright's success formula. So I'm combining these 2 together as well. The ability to accommodate to different play styles, as well as the huge fan involvement. So these last 2 points of Will Wright's success formula is what I'd say the Sims team followed the best, kinda. I say kinda because these 2 things aren't really necessarily due to like the Sims team's own doing, maybe an exception of like the EA Game Changers program. But anyways, on to my point. I genuinely believe that in addition to how well The Sims 4 can run on a variety of different computers, the huge fan involvement has significantly contributed to the continual success of The Sims 4 today, as well as transformed how we understand what this game is. I'll show you what I mean. The Sims community online is much larger now than it's ever been. Modders can create Patreons and can collect ad revenue. That's how much demand there is for it and how large of an audience there is. The huge audience for The Sims can also be seen through fan sites like The Sims VIP, The Sims Community, or The Simmers Digest, who are committed to sharing news about The Sims 4 or highlighting different creators in the community. And in addition to that, there are significantly more Sims YouTube channels and streamers that exist now than just like 5 years ago. Simmers have been able to capitalize on the undoubtedly best parts of The Sims 4, being create a sim and building, and they've been able to compensate for the more lacking parts of the game, open-ended narrative and rich gameplay. Community members are constantly evolving the way we understand The Sims 4 by sharing their builds, their creations, their mods, their CC, their sims, their saves, and their stories. This is a lot of the reason I think a lot of people still play The Sims 4 today and why it still remains a big success. This is also how the Sims team is able to still be able to expand and grow their game despite the collective backlash they may receive. The Sims actually recently put out this tweet asking Simmers like what their favorite playstyle of The Sims 4 is, identifying storytelling, building, and styling as 3 different play styles. And there's a bit of contention around whether or not these are actual play styles. I think building is probably the only one robust enough to kind of be its own play style on its own, and we've seen this throughout other generations of The Sims. But I do think it's interesting because it kind of does show how the Sims team is acknowledging us using the game, and granted that is because of the nature of The Sims 4, but don't get me wrong, cast and building is amazing in The Sims 4. Our Sims and our houses are snatched. But at the end of the day, if The Sims was meant to be a building game, it would have been called The Buildings. If The Sims 4 was meant to be a dress-up game, it would have been called The Dress-Up Simulator. But it's not, it's called The Sims. Going back to Will Wright, who initially created this game franchise, The Sims' distinct behaviors and personalities and relationships were always meant to be the core of this game. Cast and building, although those features were so cool and intuitive, those features did not make the game what they were. Without the online community that choose to dedicate a lot of their time to make content on this game, either for fun or for a living, there really doesn't seem to be much excuse about why The Sims 4 is so limited and lackluster in content content and in personality when it comes to the actual life simulation aspect of the game. This is again my own conspiracy, you're allowed to disagree with me, but in my opinion, without like the EA Game Changers program, Sims Camp, which is an amazing opportunity, I don't want to discredit that or take that away from these creators, but without these sort of amazing opportunities and different ways we see all this game promotion for The Sims 4, I really don't think The Sims 4 would be as big as it is today. Or at least I don't think people would invest as much time and energy and money into it as we see happening. From analyzing all of the past Sims games from my past like month of research, the community has undoubtedly been the strongest in The Sims 4 than it's ever been, largely to the evolution of the internet. And so, however, having a large following and an approachable game, at the end of the day can't make up for the fact that life simulation is one of the weakest aspects in a game that's sole purpose is to simulate life.
When I'm playing The Sims, I'm expecting to have fun, you know, creating stories. And to be honest with you guys, The Sims 4 is so limiting in that department.
So that's how I really see that we got here, where we're 6 years into the game and I see 4 types of players. Number 1, console players or casual players who just enjoy The Sims 4 for what it is. Number 2, people who love the imaginative freedom that The Sims 4 offers. They love how well it runs and how good it looks, and are okay with downloading mods or buying more packs to experience the fullness of it. Number 3, people who just use the aspect of the game they love the most or can tolerate the most, typically building or create a sim. And number 4, people who are frustrated and fed up with the lack of transparency from the Sims team about the lackluster Sims and gameplay, as well as the evident deviation from true life simulation, which a lot of members in the community actually want to see from this game. So, The Sims 4. What had happened was, the Sims team reinvented The Sims 4, where the gameplay is rooted in the player's own imagination and creativity, instead of true life simulation like its predecessors. The game is also largely focused on the player, not the Sims. It's not really what Will Wright set out to do, but it's what The Sims 4 has evolved into. In other words, the game doesn't really mean anything unless you make it mean something. And your level of tolerance for this approach is really what makes, I think, the majority of the difference whether you enjoy playing The Sims 4 or not. And there's not very much transparency or communication from the higher ups at the Sims team, addressing the Sims community's concerns, or at the very least acknowledging that they exist. And in all honesty, I think that communication would help some. Despite the collective complaints about the key issues with the way life simulation works, and DLC pack pricing for the minimalism of them, The Sims 4 largely remains a success today, widely due to the longevity of the franchise, the approachability for new players, the fact that this game doesn't have an equal competitor just yet, and the ongoing creativity of their large online community. Your imagination, modders, builders, and every other type of content creator truly make this game come to life. But that's just a theory. A game theory. Hey you guys, thank you so much for watching my feature film about The Sims 4. I spent an extra month on this video because I wanted to deliver y'all the same, if not better effort than the first part. So it took me a minute to get this one up, but I'm really proud of how it turned out. So I'm interested in hearing what you guys have to say. What do you think happened to The Sims 4? What do you think about this series and the research I've done? Let me know in the comments. Let's start a civil conversation, but no arguing. That's what Twitter's for. Also, please correct me in the comments if I got something incorrect or didn't mention a particular point. This video could have been longer, but I wanted to keep it as concise as possible, and I also don't know everything. So I would really appreciate that feedback in the comments as well. And finally, if you enjoyed this series, found it informative, helpful, and just want to help me out, please share this link with a friend or retweet it. I actually have a goal to get this channel monetized by the end of March, so that'll greatly help me out with that as well. And finally, just in case you're feeling a little extra generous, since you were able to watch this entire series ad-free, I'm gonna go ahead and leave my Cash App in the description down below. You know, if you just want to drop a $1 on your girl's noggin, that'll help me make more of these super thorough analysis videos, and it'll help me in this journey of becoming a content creator. So I greatly appreciate anyone who takes advantage of that link. But yeah, longest outro ever. Again, thank you guys so much for watching. My name is Asmara. I make a variety of videos on a lot of issues related to gaming, tech, culture, social issues, and I hope to see y'all stick around in the channel. Bye you guys.